Hey, so welcome to Lit Survey 11. Today is wrapping up our perspective unit with a story called A Tale of Two Beasts. So, our desired results are why is the perspective of a story important, and explain why the perspective of a story matters to the plot, to understand that there can be more than one side of a story. So we have been super busy this unit. So we have had with perspective first person, second person, third person. We've had third person limited, third person omniscient. We learned about an unreliable and a reliable narrator. We discussed how perspective influences the story based on the narrator or who's telling it. We changed endings of stories from a different narrator's perspective. We've read and analyzed a memoir. We've read and discussed folk tales. We've read and summarized Gothic horror and suspense. And we learned a lot about Edgar Allan Poe, who we're actually going to see again in our next unit. So we have been extremely busy and we've been talking about kind of the differences of perspectives and why those matter. So in Rules of the Game, we have seen our character was younger. She was 9 years old. So she's telling the story in first person perspective. But we know that um, her telling a story from a 9-year-old perspective is going to be very different than a 90-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 20-year-old telling that same story. So we're kind of just trusting her memories of what was happening. In The People Could Fly, we talked about those varying perspectives as slaves that were telling folk tales to try to keep people having hope and be positive as they were enslaved by telling these stories about the people who could fly, who did eventually would escape. We had our story Heartbeat, where it was told from his first person perspective, feeling like a nickname about being too skinny, just destroyed him. And he was layering these clothes, and he thought that people were seeing him different when he was layered. And that was all very only coming from his perspective, right? So we know that he was telling us that people thought he was skinny and gross, and the girl he liked looked at him different when he was layered up, but we never hear their perspectives. We talked a lot about how the one comment they made was probably just like a passing comment to them, but to him, it really stuck with him. And we read The Telltale Heart, and we talked about and we learned about the difference between a reliable and an unreliable narrator. So if someone is too young, if they're mentally unstable, if they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, if they're deceptive, if they're liars, if they're going through any of these things, we probably cannot trust them. And we think back to kind of why this is important for us to be able to tell if we can understand someone or not, or if we can trust them or not. And that goes in real life too. So, not just the works of literature you're reading, but can you tell the way someone's describing something to you? Are they looking around? Do they seem nervous? Are they under the influence? Are they unstable? So, we really need to know if we're being deceived in real life as well as in our literature. So, a question to think about is, can there be more than one side to a story? And I think that there's an old expression that says there's your story, there's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth. So I think that definitely shows that every person's experiences, every person's personality or relationship or background or culture kind of goes into play to how they perceive a situation or something that's going on. So I think that it's likely that there's numerous perspectives or sides to a story. And then ultimately, when people say, then the truth is kind of what did maybe really actually happen without other people's perspectives influencing it. And a really great question that we're going to bring up as you watch this book today is, if there can be two sides to a story, how do you know which is the right one? So I think that kind of goes into that quote I just said, where there's my side, your side, and the truth. And I think that it's usually kind of a mix of all of them. that kind of goes into play when you have to kind of figure out, well, which is the right one if everybody kind of has their own view or opinion on this. So I'm going to link this to you, but this is a YouTube video of a children's book, which is called A Tale of Two Beasts. As you listen, be sure to listen for the differing perspectives given. So you can pause this and then go to the course page and play it, and then come back and we have some questions to go over. So that first question to kind of comprehend and reflect on is, who was telling the story in the beginning? So you want to think about, who is telling that story? Who is telling the story in part two? So we know that we have the little girl's perspective first, then we have the raccoon's perspective. Now the stories differ because the little girl thinks that she is doing amazing. She's got him a collar, she saved him from the forest, he was hanging and he was alone, and she's taking him on walks and feeding him. And his perspective is that she took him from what he was doing that he loved to do. His perspective is that she put this really uncomfortable collar on him, that she was walking him frontward and backward, and he had to escape her. So he looked at her as if she was like a beast, and she looked at him like he was a beast that she was saving. So it's kind of up to your opinion, but was this story a kidnapping or a rescue? What do you think? So our guiding question is, why is the perspective of a story important? And the perspective of a story ultimately is important to keeping the plot going and understanding that there can be more than one side to that story. So tomorrow you guys will have a CYU work session to wrap up this unit.